I didn't expect Thanksgiving to start falling apart before the turkey was even out of the oven. But the moment my mother-in-law Elaine stepped through our front door, something in the air shifted like the room tightened around her presence. She didn't even say hello. Her eyes immediately scanned my living room, judging every detail, from the fall wreath I hung on the door to the cinnamon candles burning on the entry table. I had imagined this holiday so differently. I thought hosting Thanksgiving for the first time as a married woman would bring us closer as a family. I thought showing Elaine that I cared, that I wanted her to feel welcome in our home, might heal the quiet wounds between us. Instead, the first words she said were, "You changed the furniture again?" Daniel never liked dark colors, and she walked right past me. I smiled politely, pretending her comment didn't hit the exact insecurity she had poked since the day I met her. My taste, my choices, my style, all of which she treated as personal offenses. My husband Daniel came up behind me, kissed my cheek and whispered, "Stay calm, it's just one night, one night." He had no idea how heavy those words felt. I had spent 3 days prepping, ironing linens, polishing my grandmother's old silverware, preparing every dish from scratch, even baking 2 pies because I wasn't sure which flavor his mother preferred. I wanted this holiday to be perfect, not just for me, but for us. But Elaine had a way of turning even the softest moments into sharp edges. As Daniel helped her take off her coat, she looked at the dress I wore, simple, ivory soft fabric that flowed slightly at the waist, and she let out a sound between a laugh and a scoff. "You dressed up," she said, then glanced at Daniel. "Too much, don't you think?" "It's Thanksgiving, not a wedding rehearsal." He didn't respond. He simply sighed, the way he always did when caught between us, and went to greet his aunt and uncle who arrived right behind her. Meanwhile, I stood still for a moment, reminding myself to breathe, reminding myself why I wanted this night to work. I believed that if I could just get through Thanksgiving gracefully, maybe it would open a door, maybe she would see I wasn't her enemy. The house started filling with voices, plates clinking, soft jazz playing, and the smell of sage and butter as the turkey finished roasting. Gas complemented the decorations, the aroma, the warmth of the home. Only Elaine remained unimpressed. She drifted around the dining room like a critic inspecting an exhibit, running her finger along the table runner as if checking for imperfections. When she reached the plates, she frowned and said, "Your napkin fold is interesting, not traditional." I forced a smile and thanked her for the observation. But the real blow landed when she whispered to Daniel, now quietly enough, "You had better Thanksgivings growing up." The comment stabbed deep because she wanted me to hear it. She always wanted me to hear the things she didn't have the courage to say plainly. Still, I pushed through, focusing on the potatoes I needed to mash, the gravy I needed to stir, the stuffing I needed to reheat. I repeated to myself, just get through the night, just breathe. I didn't want Daniel to feel torn. I didn't want to be the reason the holiday turned tense. But every time Elaine crossed the room, I felt my stomach tighten. She would lift lids off dishes without asking, smell them, sometimes wrinkle her nose as if something were wrong. She opened the oven without permission, letting precious heat escape, and muttered, looks dry." She rearranged the serving spoons I had already placed. She even criticized the music. "This is too slow. Makes the house feel sleepy." By late afternoon, the guests were getting comfortable. Laughter began filling the living room. Daniel's sister, Monica, arrived with her kids, who ran straight toward the backyard. She hugged me genuinely, complimented the house, and said she was proud of me for hosting. Her warmth made the tension loosen slightly, but Elaine immediately called her over to complain about the temperature of the wine glasses. I watched Monica roll her eyes and whisper, "Good luck," before walking away. At some point, I slipped into the kitchen to check the turkey one last time. The quiet gave me a moment to breathe, a moment to find myself again beneath the weight of Elaine's presence. My hands rested on the countertop, grounding myself. I thought about the law of cause and effect, not in a mystical way, but in the simple emotional sense. Elaine's bitterness wasn't truly about me. Her reactions were reflections of her own fears, her own losses. I knew that, but knowing didn't make it hurt less. I basted the turkey carefully, then checked the pies cooling on the rack. Everything looked beautiful. Everything smelled comforting. I allowed myself a small moment of pride. A small moment of peace. That was when I felt someone behind me. I turned, expecting Daniel, but it was her. Elaine stepped into the kitchen slowly, closing the door behind her with a deliberate little push. Her lips were tight, her eyes cold. She looked around the kitchen as if ensuring we were alone, and then she walked closer until only a few inches separated us. I didn't speak. I didn't even blink. And then she said it, the sentence that tore the night apart. "You don't belong in this family." Her voice was low, almost gentle, which made the cruelty cut deeper. My breath caught. My skin prickled. For a moment, I couldn't move. I could barely swallow. The bowl in my hands trembled slightly, and I set it down quickly before dropping it. I felt my throat tighten, heat rising behind my eyes. She looked satisfied, like she had finally said what she'd been thinking for years. "You tried too hard," she continued. "Daniel won't say it, but we all see it. This," she gestured around the kitchen, "isn't you, you're pretending. You're pretending to be a wife in a family you don't fit into." I wanted to speak. I wanted to defend myself, but the words stuck in my throat. All I could think was, why does she hate me this much? What have I ever done to deserve this? I felt small. Smaller than I had in a long time. And that was when something shifted in the air, not in a supernatural sense, but in the emotional pressure of the room. Because at that exact moment, I heard a soft sound behind the door, a shuffle. A breath. Daniel. He had heard something. I could feel it. But Elaine didn't know. She turned away, smoothing her hair with a self-satisfied little smile. "Fix your makeup," she said. "You look emotional." And she walked out, leaving me shaking in the middle of my own kitchen. I stood there for a long moment, gripping the counter, trying to hold myself together. The house was still full of laughter, clinking glasses, and warm conversation, but inside me, everything felt cracked. I wondered whether I should just walk out the front door, get into my car, and spend Thanksgiving alone at a diner. Anything would feel kinder than this. But I stayed. Because something in me, some quiet strength, refused to give her the satisfaction of watching me break. When I finally gathered myself and stepped back toward the dining room, I saw Daniel standing near the doorway. He wasn't moving. He wasn't speaking. He was staring at me with an expression I had never seen before, something heavy, something shocked, something that told me he had heard enough to finally understand. And that was the beginning of everything that would come next. Daniel didn't say anything right away. For a second, we just stood there in the hallway between the kitchen and the dining room, suspended between two worlds, the warm, noisy holiday everyone expected and a quiet, sharp reality that had just been laid bare. His eyes searched mine as if he were trying to confirm what he'd heard, as if a part of him still hoped he had misunderstood his mother. I swallowed hard and looked away, afraid that if I held his gaze too long, the tears I was holding back would spill over in front of everyone. "You okay?" he asked softly. It was such a small question, but it felt loaded. I forced my lips into a tight, practiced smile. "I'm fine," I lied, because I was tired of being the problem, tired of being the one who disrupted his family's precious traditions. "Let's just get dinner on the table." He didn't look convinced, but our guests were waiting, and the timer on the oven chose that moment to beep. The sound jolted both of us back into motion. Daniel stepped into the kitchen and grabbed the carving knives while I reached for the oven mitts and pulled the turkey out. Steam filled the room, carrying the smell of rosemary, butter, and garlic. Under different circumstances, it would have made me proud. Right now, it just reminded me how hard I had tried to create a perfect evening for people who might never see me as enough. Smells amazing, Daniel said quietly, and I could hear that he meant it. You did all this. I nodded, eyes fixed on the turkey. Just help me get everything out there, I replied. I didn't have space for compliments. I barely had space for oxygen. We carried the dishes into the dining room one by one: mashed potatoes, stuffing, green bean casserole, roasted carrots with honey, cranberry sauce, warm rolls. Each time I set something on the table, a guest would react positively. Wow, this looks incredible. You really went all out. I smiled and thanked them. It was automatic. Elaine sat at the end of the table, her chosen throne, watching every movement with that same air of critical detachment. When I placed the turkey in the center, someone whistled softly. Now that's a bird, Daniel's uncle Rick said with a grin. Nice job, kiddo. He had known Daniel since childhood and treated me kindly from the start. His praise helped a little, but my eyes flicked to Elaine, waiting for her verdict even though I hated that I cared. She tilted her head and pursed her lips. It looks a little dark, she said eventually. Did you leave it in too long? The table went quieter than it should have. I felt heat rush to my face. Daniel looked at his mother, then at me, and something in his jaw tightened. It looks perfect, he said, his voice firmer than usual. Elaine arched an eyebrow, clearly not used to being contradicted. We all took our seats, the room buzzing with the nervous sort of energy that comes when people sense tension but don't understand its source. Daniel sat beside me, his hand brushing mine under the table as if to anchor us together. Elaine was at one end, and at the other sat his aunt and uncle. Monica sat with her kids closer to the middle, trying to keep the atmosphere light by making them laugh. Before we start, Daniel said, clearing his throat, I just want to thank everyone for being here. This is our first Thanksgiving in the new house, our first time hosting as a married couple, and it means a lot that you all came. I glanced at him, surprised. We hadn't talked about him saying anything. His voice was steady, but I recognized the edge beneath it, like a current running under calm water. I know my wife put a lot of work into this, he continued, and I'm really proud of what she's done. There was a soft murmur of agreement. I tried to accept his words, tried to let them sink in, but Elaine's eyes were on me, cool and appraising, and I could feel her earlier sentence echoing in the back of my mind. You don't belong in this family. Let's say grace, she cut in. As we've always done. Daniel hesitated, just for a second, before nodding. Sure, Mom, go ahead. She launched into a familiar rehearsed prayer, thanking God for family, health, tradition, and the home that has welcomed us this year. The words sounded good, but there was something hollow about them, like she was reading from a script. It struck me how easy it was to speak about gratitude while harboring contempt, how easy it was to pretend unity while quietly feeding division. I wondered how many families did this every year, gathered around beautifully set tables, while sitting on top of unspoken resentments. After the prayer, the usual rhythm of passing dishes began. Kids argued playfully about who got more mashed potatoes, adults reached for rolls and salad, glasses clinked. For a while, I managed to blend in, serving others, making small talk, laughing when appropriate. But every time Elaine spoke, I felt myself brace. So, she said at one point, turning to me with that polite smile she used in public. How's your little job going? She knew very well what I did for a living. I was a graphic designer, working remotely for a marketing firm. It wasn't little, it paid a decent income. But to her, everything about me had to be diminished. It's going well, I replied. We just signed a new client actually. A big one, out of New York. Oh, she said as if she'd asked how my hobby was and I'd said I'd sold something at a craft fair. Well, that's cute. Monica shot me an apologetic look. Your designs are amazing, she added quickly. You should see the stuff she's done for the kids' school fundraiser. They loved it. Elaine ignored her. Daniel always thought he'd marry someone more traditional, she said, casually tearing a piece of roll. You know. Someone who stayed home with the children, cooked, focused on the household. That's what he grew up with. I set my fork down. The table grew quiet again. Daniel's hand tightened around his knife. Mom, he said slowly. That's not true. She blinked at him innocently. I'm just saying what you used to talk about when you were younger. Remember? I felt exposed, like someone had pulled a rug out from under me. I'm capable of doing both, I said softly. Working and being a good partner are mutually exclusive. Elaine gave a sympathetic little nod that wasn't sympathetic at all. Of course, dear, it's just not how we've done things in this family. There it was again, this family. The invisible fence she drew around all of them with me standing just outside it. Daniel put his fork down. Mom, he repeated more firmly this time. That's enough. She looked at him, surprised by his tone. I'm simply stating facts. You're being rude, he replied. To my wife. In our home. On a holiday, she's worked her ass off to make special. The entire table went still. Kids stopped whispering. Rick's eyes shifted between them like he was watching a tennis match. I could feel my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to shrink into my chair. Another part of me wanted to stand and clap. Elaine gave a small, disbelieving laugh. Oh, so now I'm the villain because I have standards? I raised you better than this, Daniel. You never used to talk to me this way. You never used to talk to my wife this way, he shot back. His voice wasn't loud, but there was an unmistakable edge in it. She stared at him, shocked not because of what he said, I suspected, but because he was saying it in front of everyone. Her cheeks flushed with a mix of anger and humiliation. I could almost see the calculation in her eyes. If she backed down now, she'd lose control. If she escalated, she might lose him. She chose a middle ground. I think, she said stiffly, we're all a little tired and emotional, and perhaps some people are being oversensitive. Let's just eat. She picked up her fork again, signaling that the conversation was over for her at least. But for Daniel, something had been unlocked. For me, something had cracked open. I could feel it, the cause and effect of every moment we had allowed her comments to slide, every time we had stayed silent to keep the peace. This was the other side of that equation. When you spend years bending around someone's behavior, eventually something breaks. Either you break, or the pattern does. Dinner continued, but the atmosphere had changed. People ate, but more quietly. The kids, sensing the tension, kept their voices low. Small pockets of conversation started up again about football games, work, school, but nothing quite drowned out the feeling hanging over the table. At one point, during a lull, Rick cleared his throat. Turkey's great, by the way, he said. Best I've had in a long time. Agreed, Monica added. Seriously. You outdid yourself. I thanked them, and something in me softened a little. It wasn't all of them. It wasn't the family. It was one person whose bitterness had infected everyone else's comfort. Realizing that helped me separate the faces at the table from the voice that had told me I didn't belong. Still, those words kept echoing. Every time I glanced at Elaine, I remembered the way she looked at me in the kitchen, the cool satisfaction in her eyes. She ate quietly now, pretending nothing had happened. But I knew I couldn't keep pretending. During dessert, I escaped back to the kitchen under the pretense of cutting the pies. I needed a moment alone. I set the pumpkin pie on the counter, picked up the knife, and then just stopped. The hum of conversation in the dining room faded into a dull murmur. I stared at my reflection in the microwave door, seeing the tiredness around my eyes, the strain in my expression. Why am I doing this? I whispered to myself. Why am I trying so hard for someone who clearly doesn't want me here? The quiet answered with its own kind of honesty. Deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for the people who appreciated it, for Monica, for the kids, for Rick and his wife, for Daniel. For us. I was building a new family with him, even if some people refused to see it. The real question wasn't whether I belonged in his family's old structure. It was whether I believed I belonged in my own life. I wiped my eyes gently with the back of my hand before any tears fell. I cut the pie, plated the slices, and took a deep breath. I was about to carry the first 2 plates out when I felt that presence in the doorway again. But this time, it wasn't Elaine. It was Daniel. He was leaning against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, watching me with a seriousness that made my chest tighten. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "After this. No more pretending everything's fine." For the first time that day, hope flickered inside me. "Okay," I replied, my voice soft but steady. "No more pretending." He walked over, took the plates from my hands, and gave me a look filled with something new resolve. And as we stepped back into the dining room together, I had no idea that the conversation he was preparing to have would do more than just defend me. It would drag old family secrets into the light, break patterns that had ruled his life for years, and turn that Thanksgiving night into the dividing line between the life we had been tolerating and the one we truly wanted. Dessert didn't go smoothly, of course it didn't. Nothing about that night had gone the way I planned, and once the first crack had opened at the dinner table, there was no sealing it back up. When Daniel and I returned with the pumpkin and pecan pies, the tone in the room had shifted again. Conversations were more fragmented, punctuated by awkward silences. Forks clinked against plates, but no one was fully present anymore. Everyone was waiting for the next spark, the next fracture, the next moment when politeness wouldn't be strong enough to hold everything together. Elaine sat stiffly at her end of the table, spine straight, shoulders tight. She looked like a general preparing for battle. Except the battlefield was a Thanksgiving table decorated with autumn leaves and a scented candle shaped like a turkey. She tapped her fork against the plate rhythmically, the sound grating in the thick silence. Monica leaned over to whisper something to her daughter, who nodded quickly and asked if she could go play in the backyard. "Yes, sweetie," Monica said, then shot me a look full of sympathy. I took my seat beside Daniel as he began passing the pie slices around. Rick cracked a joke about calories, probably trying to lighten the atmosphere, but no one laughed. And that was when Daniel spoke again, softly at first, but with unmistakable purpose. "I need to say something," he said. Every head turned toward him. Even the children paused before slipping out the back door. Elaine's fingers froze around her fork. "Daniel," she said sharply, warningly. "I think we've had enough drama for tonight." He ignored her. "No, actually, we haven't." My heart started pounding. My palms grew cold. Part of me wanted to beg him to stop because I knew what confrontation with his mother looked like. Years of witnessing it had taught me that she didn't lose quietly. But another part of me, the part that had been holding itself together with sheer force, wanted him to continue. Elaine narrowed her eyes. "Don't be theatrical," she snapped. "Just eat your dessert." Daniel looked at her with a steadiness I'd never seen before. "I heard you," he said, his voice low but clear. "In the kitchen." Elaine blinked, her face twitching almost imperceptibly. "Heard me what?" "You told her she doesn't belong in this family." The room went silent. Dead silent. I felt every muscle in my body go rigid, my breathing stalled. My heart beat against my ribs like it wanted out. Elaine's lips parted, but no words came out. She looked around the table, searching for someone to rescue her, someone to confirm that she couldn't possibly have said something like that. But the room stayed still, frozen, waiting. Finally she spoke. "That's ridiculous," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't say anything like that." "You must have misheard." Daniel didn't waver. "I didn't mishear." She glared at him. "So now you're calling your own mother a liar?" He held her gaze. "I'm telling you, I heard you hurting my wife, again. And I'm done pretending it's just misunderstanding or personality differences or whatever excuse we've used to keep the peace." A few people at the table shifted uncomfortably. Rick lifted his glass but didn't drink from it. Monica exhaled slowly, almost like she'd been waiting her whole life to witness this moment. Elaine's voice rose slightly. "I didn't mean anything by it. You know how sensitive she is." My throat tightened. "I didn't look at her, I couldn't." Daniel leaned forward. "Do you hear yourself? You insult her, and then you blame her for reacting. You've been doing this for years. Oh, so now I'm the problem?" Elaine demanded, slamming her hand onto the table. Monica muttered under her breath, "You always have been," but softly enough that only Rick and I heard. Elaine turned to me, her eyes blazing. "I welcomed you into this family." "No, you didn't," Daniel cut in immediately. "You tolerated her, barely. And every time she tried to connect with you, you found a way to cut her down. Today was just the first time I actually heard it without you trying to hide it behind fake politeness." The color drained from Elaine's face. "I don't have to sit here and be attacked in my own son's home." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Mom, this is our home. And you attacked my wife in it." She pushed her plate away. "I should leave." "You should stay," Monica said suddenly, surprising the entire table. "Because I think this conversation is long overdue." Elaine whipped her head toward her daughter. "And what exactly is your problem with me?" Monica sat back in her chair, breathing slowly. Her eyes had that tired, defeated look of someone who had been living under the weight of something heavy for far too long. "My problem? Mom, you undermine everyone in this family unless they're doing exactly what you want. You do it to me. You do it to Daniel. You even do it to your grandkids sometimes. And we all tiptoe around you like you're made of glass." Elaine gasped, genuinely affronted, her hand flying to her chest. "How dare you speak to me like that?" "I'm not done," Monica said firmly. I stared at her, stunned. I had never seen this side of her. She was usually gentle, conflict avoidant, the kind of person who smoothed rough edges in the room. But tonight, something inside her had snapped too. "I heard what you said in the kitchen," Monica continued, her voice steady now. "I wasn't close, but I was in the hallway. And it wasn't a misunderstanding." "You meant it." Elaine's throat bobbed as she swallowed. I didn't mean it like that." Rick sighed heavily. "Elaine, come on, you've been harsh with her since day one. And with everyone who wasn't your ideal version of who your kids should be with." Elaine's voice was barely a whisper now. "You're all ganging up on me." "No," Daniel said. "We're finally telling the truth." She shook her head, trembling, looking wounded, but beneath that wounded expression, I saw something else. Fear. Deep, bone-deep fear. This wasn't just defensiveness. This was unraveling. "What are you all trying to do?" she whispered. "Replace me? Push me out? Make me the villain?" "No one is doing that," Daniel said gently. "But you need to stop treating my wife like she's a threat." Elaine stared at him. But it wasn't anger this time, it was anguish. "You're my son," she said, tears forming. "My only son, you were my world. And then you got married and everything changed." Her voice broke. Monica leaned forward. "Mom, Daniel didn't replace you. He grew up. That's what's supposed to happen. You held on too tightly." Elaine covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook. For a moment, the room softened. Even I did. Because beneath all her cruelty, her manipulation, her criticism, I saw what had always been there. A woman terrified of losing control, losing relevance, losing her place in her own family. Daniel took a deep breath. "Mom," he said quietly, "I love you, but I love my wife. And I won't let you hurt her anymore." Elaine lowered her hands slowly. Mascara had smudged beneath her eyes. "I didn't know I was hurting anyone," she said weakly. "Yes," Daniel replied, "you did. Maybe not intentionally. Maybe not consciously. But the impact is real." She looked at me then, not coldly this time, but with something like confusion, maybe regret. But I couldn't be sure. I don't know how to fix this," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "You don't have to fix it tonight. But you do have to acknowledge it." Elaine pressed her lips together, silent. The room held its breath. And then she stood up abruptly, pushing her chair back with a grating scrape. "I need some air," she murmured, voice trembling, and walked quickly down the hallway toward the guest room. The moment she disappeared behind the door, the entire table exhaled at once, as if we had all been holding our breath for hours. Rick leaned back in his chair. "Well," he muttered, "that was something." Monica wiped her eyes discreetly. "It needed to happen," she said. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, looking exhausted and relieved at the same time. "Yeah," he said softly. "It did." I sat there, staring at the empty spot where Elaine had been. My heart was pounding, but a strange calm settled beneath it. This wasn't the ending of a family. It was the beginning of truth. And truth, no matter how painful, was the only thing strong enough to change everything. We didn't talk right away after Elaine disappeared into the guest room. People shifted in their seats, unsure whether to pretend nothing had happened or start putting on their coats. The kids had already drifted outside, their laughter a strange contrast to the heavy air in the dining room. I stared at the crumbs on my plate, my fork still in my hand but forgotten. For the first time since everyone arrived, I didn't feel like the one holding everything together. The structure of the night had collapsed, and yet, deep down, I felt a peculiar sense of relief. It was out. The things I've been feeling for years were finally spoken out loud, not just by me, but by the people who had grown up inside that very family system. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't too sensitive. I was just finally seen. Daniel reached over and rested his hand on mine. It was warm, steady. "You okay?" he asked again, but this time I could tell he wasn't asking out of obligation. He really wanted to know. I took a breath and nodded, even though tears were burning in my eyes. "I don't know," I admitted. "I feel terrible, and also weirdly lighter." Monica gave a small, exhausted laugh. "Yeah, that tracks," she said. "Welcome to confronting Mom." Rick sighed and leaned forward, folding his hands on the table. "Look, I think maybe we should all give her a few minutes," he said. "Dealing with a lot, whether she wants to or not." His wife nodded. "We've all walked on eggshells for a long time. Maybe this is the first time the eggshells finally broke." There was something strangely poetic about that. Sometimes you don't realize you're walking on shards until you stop and look down at your own feet. Monica stood up slowly. "I'm going to check on the kids," she said. "I think they're pretending not to know something's wrong, but they always know." She gave me a quick side hug as she passed. "By the way," she whispered, "you really did an amazing job today. None of this is your fault." Her words sank in like a small warm light in a dark room. One by one, people started to move, some clearing plates, some gathering in the living room, some going outside to make phone calls or breathe. The structure of Thanksgiving as an event dissolved, leaving only the reality of the people in it. I began stacking plates automatically, letting the simple rhythm of the task center me. Plate, fork, napkin. Plate, fork, napkin. As I carried a stack into the kitchen, Daniel followed me. He shut the door behind us gently and leaned against the counter, watching me in that quiet way he did when something important was forming in his mind. I'm sorry, he said. I set the place down and turned to him slowly. For what? For not hearing it sooner, he said. For all the times you told me she made you feel small and I tried to smooth it over. I wanted to believe it wasn't that bad, that she'd get used to you. That if we just kept the peace, it would get better. I swallowed, feeling my throat tighten. I know, I said. I know you were trying to keep everyone happy. And I ended up failing both of you, he replied. I kept telling myself it was easier this way. That I didn't want to start drama, but all that really did was give her more space to keep hurting you. And if I'm being honest, I didn't want to face who she becomes when someone pushes back. His honesty cut through the fog in my chest. He wasn't hiding behind excuses. He wasn't minimizing anything. He was standing right in the middle of the truth with me. Do you remember last year? I asked quietly. When she said I was playing house instead of building a real home? He closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. Yeah, I should have told her that was out of line. Instead, I made a joke about it. And 3 months ago, I added, my voice trembling slightly, when she told your cousin that I trapped you into marrying me? You said she was just upset about something else. He flinched. I know what I've done. Or rather, what I didn't do. There was a beat of silence between us, filled with all the small moments we'd brushed aside, all the tiny cuts that had added up to one deep wound. The truth was, this night wasn't just about Elaine. It was about the patterns we'd both participated in, even unintentionally. I don't want to be that person anymore, he said finally. I don't want to keep choosing silence because it's easier in the moment. Easier now usually means harder later. And I think tonight. Later finally arrived. A sad, understanding smile pulled at my lips. I think so too. He took a step closer and cupped my face gently in his hands. His thumbs brushed the corners of my eyes where the tears were threatening to fall. You belong with me, he said. You belong in this home. You belong in my life. Whether my mother accepts that or not is her choice. But I'm done letting her rewrite the story. Emotion surged up so fast I couldn't hold it back anymore. A tear slipped down my cheek. Then another, then more. Thank you, I whispered. I needed to hear that. Maybe more than I realized. He pulled me into a hug, holding me tightly as if anchoring us both. For a moment, the kitchen felt like a sanctuary again. Not a battlefield, not a stage, just a place where two people who loved each other were trying to figure it out. When he pulled back, there was determination in his eyes. I'm going to talk to her again, he said, not to argue, but to set things straight, and this time, I'm not backing down. Are you sure? I asked. You don't owe her a performance. You already stood up at the table. You don't have to keep proving anything. It's not about proving, he replied. It's about clarity. About setting boundaries that are actually spoken, not just implied. I need her to hear it from me, directly. And I need to say it for myself too. I nodded slowly. Okay, I'll support whatever you decide. He gave me a small, grateful smile. Why don't you stay here for a minute? Breathe, drink some water. I'll handle this part. As he turned to leave, impulse tugged at me. I reached for his hand. Dan, yeah? If she makes you choose, I said quietly. I don't want you to feel forced. I don't want this to become some dramatic ultimatum in your mind. He squeezed my fingers gently. I already chose, he said, the moment I married you. I just hadn't fully realized what that choice required from me. Tonight. I'm catching up. He left before I could say anything else. I stayed in the kitchen, but I didn't busy myself this time. I just leaned against the counter, hands wrapped loosely around a glass of water, listening to the muffled sounds from down the hallway. Drawers opening, footsteps, a door closing. My heart hammered in my chest, not because I thought he'd abandon me, but because I knew how deep the roots of guilt ran in him. Children who grow up managing a parent's emotions often feel like betraying them is the worst sin imaginable. And tonight, for the first time, he wasn't managing her. He was opposing her. After a few minutes, the faint murmur of voices reached my ears. I couldn't make out the words, only the tones, a mix of raised and lowered, hurt and firm. The emotional rhythm swung back and forth, like a pendulum between accusation and truth. For a second, I thought about going back there, asserting myself, defending myself. But something in me understood that this particular conversation needed to be between them. Between the version of him who had always been the good son, and the version of him who was finally becoming his own man. I stared at the candle flickering gently on the counter and realized something. Life really does echo what we tolerate. We can't control other people, but we can control what we let stay in our space. And if we keep allowing the same words, the same patterns, the same dynamics, they eventually define us more than the things we actually believe in. Tonight was the first time we said, out loud, "This ends here." The hallway creaked softly. A moment later, the guest room door opened. I heard footsteps, and then Elaine's voice, raw, shaken. "This is cruel," she said somewhere beyond the kitchen door. "You're turning my own family against me." "No," Daniel replied. "You did that when you made everyone tiptoe around you. I'm just done playing along." There was a pause, and then footsteps came closer. The kitchen door opened, and both of them stood there, Daniel looking steady but tired. Elaine looking like a storm that had lost some of its lightning but none of its rain. She looked at me, eyes red and swollen. "He says, I owe you an apology," she said, like the words tasted foreign. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You do," he said simply. Elaine's gaze dropped to the floor. For a moment, I thought she was going to walk away again. But then she took a shaky breath. "I shouldn't have said what I said," she murmured. In the kitchen, I was upset. I felt replaced, pushed aside. And instead of dealing with that, I took it out on you. It wasn't fair. It wasn't an elegant apology. It wasn't perfectly worded. It didn't undo anything, but it was more than I'd ever heard from her. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied, my voice soft but clear. "But it wasn't just today. It's been a pattern. For a long time." She flinched, but nodded. "I know," she said quietly. "I don't know how to be anything else. I've always been this way." "You can learn," Daniel said. "If you want to." She looked at him, and for the first time I saw not the controlling mother, not the critic, not the gatekeeper to some imagined family standard. I saw a woman who was terrified of becoming irrelevant, of being left alone with her own emptiness. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. "You won't," he said. "But you will lose access to us if you keep treating my wife like an intruder. That's the difference. I'm not asking you to stop being my mother. I'm asking you to stop acting like she's stealing me from you." Silence pulsed in the room like a heartbeat. Elaine wiped at her eyes. "I need time," she said. "I can't pretend everything is fine tonight. I think I'll go home in the morning." "That's okay," I said, and I meant it. "Take the time you need." She glanced at me, surprise flickering across her features. I wasn't sure if she expected me to gloat, to lash out, to say something vindictive, but I didn't have it in me. I was tired. Not just from the day, but from years of trying to earn something that should have never required this much effort. Elaine exhaled shakily. "I'll say good night to everyone," she murmured, and then left the kitchen. When she was gone, Daniel turned to me, his expression searching. "How do you feel?" he asked. I thought about it. Sad, I admitted. Relieved, shaken, weirdly hopeful, but also clear. "Clear about what?" he asked. "About what I will and won't live with," I replied. "About the kind of family we're building." And about the fact that belonging is not something I'm going to beg for anymore. Either it's given, or we walk away from the table. He nodded slowly. I want that too, he said. For both of us. That night, after everyone had left and the house finally went quiet, we sat on the couch in the dim light of the living room, surrounded by half-melted candles and abandoned dessert plates. The Thanksgiving decorations looked almost symbolic, now leaves scattered across a table where a storm had passed through. We talked until our voices grew hoarse, about boundaries, about future visits, about what we were willing to accept, about the fact that protecting our marriage wasn't a betrayal of his family. It was the foundation of the family we were building. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of a suitcase zipper. I peeked through the bedroom curtains and saw Elaine loading her bag into Rick's car. She didn't come back inside to say goodbye. Instead, she left a folded note on the dining table. When I opened it, the handwriting was tight and shaky. I'm not ready to talk, it read. But I heard you. Both of you. I'm trying to understand where I went wrong. I need space. Mom, it wasn't much, but it was something. As I stood there holding the note, Daniel came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. You okay? He asked, resting his chin on my shoulder. Yeah, I said. And for the first time, I didn't have to lie. I think I actually am. We spent the rest of the morning cleaning up together, scraping plates, washing dishes, packing leftovers. The house felt quieter, but also more honest. Without the performance, without the tension, our home felt like ours again. The day after Thanksgiving, sun poured through the windows, turning the mess into something almost beautiful, evidence of life, of people, of change. At one point, I sat at the now cleared dining table and looked around, thinking about everything that had happened. How one sentence whispered in a kitchen had cracked open years of unspoken truths. How uncomfortable it had been. How necessary it had been. How relationships, like everything else, follow a simple rhythm. You either repeat the pattern or you break it. Both are choices. Both have consequences. And I realized something I wish someone had told me earlier in life. Sometimes the moment that seems to ruin everything is the same moment that makes real healing possible. Sometimes the person who tells you you don't belong here is actually giving you a chance to decide where you truly do. If you're listening to this and some part of my story feels familiar, maybe that's not an accident. Maybe this is your sign to stop shrinking yourself to fit into places that were never meant to hold you. You deserve a seat at a table where you are seen, where your effort is valued, where your presence isn't treated like a threat. And if your current table doesn't offer that, you're allowed to build a new one. If this story resonated with you, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes just writing your story out loud is the first step to changing it. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. This little community is built on real stories, real emotions, and the hope that we're all a little less alone when we share them. And hey, if this hit home and you feel like supporting these stories, you can even buy me a coffee. It's a small gesture, but it helps keep the mic on, the lights warm, and the stories coming. Either way, I'm grateful you stayed with me until the end. Because that Thanksgiving, my mother-in-law may have ruined the night. But what my husband said and what we finally faced together changed everything.